me. Just as a personal anecdote, back in 1991, I was deployed by the International Federation of the Red Cross to the border of Turkey and Iraq to support the Kurdish people. And some of the challenges, that's about 6 years before Sphere was developed, but a lot of the issues that we had to confront as part of the broader NGO community found fruit in the Sphere project. So definitely brought back some memories for myself, definitely for sure. So anyway, thank you very much, Diego, for inviting me to be here this afternoon. I want to spend a few minutes talking about an area of interest of mine that I've worked on for at least the last 15 years before my recent retirement from the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And that's really looking at disaster in all of its manifestations, whether it's recovery, or, preparedness, mitigation, within the North American family. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. I will see if I can share my screen. I should be able to do this. There we go. I hope everyone can you see my screen? Very good. Okay. All right, so again, I just want to give you some, just a short, brief introduction, because it is a very broad and a very complex topic for sure to talk about. But I want to start out by really presenting some key factors around the current reality of our borders, both our northern border and our southern border. What is some of the historical context under which we've operated as the three main countries on the mainland of North America, and look at some of the challenges and opportunities, and then really pose a question at the end around where do we go? How do we get beyond just talking to each other and really develop mechanisms for very practical and concrete action steps? What's interesting, a lot of people don't realize, is that although I am going to focus mostly on Canada, the United States, and Mexico as the three big ones in North America, an interesting side fact for all of you is that there are actually 23 countries in North America and 18 dependencies. Under the United Nations, the Caribbean nations and territories are also considered part of North America. And at the end of my presentation, I'll bring that group back in to really talk about how we're trying to work with them as well. Obviously, Canada is the largest country in the hemisphere. The United States is by far the most populous, but again, it's a very diverse area with over 594 million people. So paying attention and discussing how as political entities, the countries in North America can really work together to better address some of the both common issues as well as planning for what the future brings. In terms of the US-Canada, the northern border, here's just some simple facts for you to highlight how important it is for us to really be thinking about collaborating with them. Again, we have over 74 million people, citizens of both countries, living within 100 miles of our northern border. The possibility of a catastrophic event occurring is very real. We have history behind us, and we are living history right now, obviously, with the COVID response, but it shows the importance of paying attention to how we collaborate as two countries. You can see some of the stats there in terms of how critical the Canada-United States relationship is in economic terms and in individuals and the amount of money that crosses those borders. And just our own experience following 9/11 in 2001, when that border was abruptly shut down. And as we've recently seen, when we had to close the border because of the COVID pandemic, the havoc that wreaks on the economies of both countries, again, feeds into this topic, that it is critical that the two countries look at ways of collaborating, planning, not just for how to respond to an event, but really how to look at how do we strengthen the communities that those 74 million people live in, to build resilient communities and prepare for the next catastrophic events. In terms of the US-Mexico context, going to our southwest border, the statistics are just as impressive. You can see we have 31 million people living within the border region between Mexico and the US. We have over 350 million legal border crossings annually. So it is by far and away our busiest border, both socially and economically, with over $427 billion of trade crossing that border. So anything that impacts that border, any kind of natural disaster, man-made disaster, which is very real and has occurred, has immediate impacts on the lives of both countries by a long shot. So again, these contexts help us to understand the importance and the value of bilateral, and then, as I hope, ultimately trilateral dialogue. Now, for both countries, or all three countries, we have very common risk. Although we are ecologically diverse, we have a lot of commonality in terms of wildland fires, floods, earthquakes. Obviously, right now, we're living in the world of a global pandemic. That's not the first one to hit our continent in the last 10 years. It's actually the second, because we actually had the H1N1 flu of a previous decade. But depending on what coast you live in and where your community is, obviously we have tsunamis. Mexico has one of the highest number of active volcanoes in the world. Those obviously have measurable impacts on large numbers of people. So the risks are common. The need to look at those risks, to do that disaster planning, to look at ways of supporting each other when catastrophic disasters occur, again, I think bears pointing out. And in addition to those common risks, we obviously have some cross-cutting issues that really are global in scope right now. Climate change, I'm sure you're in your studies with Dr. Otaegui, you've talked about the impacts of climate change. And you can see the quote there, the FEMA administrator said that this really is the crisis of our generation now, and that we need to be looking at how climate change impacts our daily lives. We need to adjust our policies. We need to look at the politics involved in it, none of which is easy. And having spent 15 years in FEMA working with not just Canada and Mexico, but countries around the world, I'm more than aware of the challenges and the sensitivities when you start talking about these issues and how they really need to be addressed in a multi-faceted format. The interesting thing about Canada and Mexico is that since World War II, there's been a multitude of developments, ways of trying to look at how we work either bilaterally or trilaterally. And you can see here on the screen just a whole slew of these relevant either current or past items. Obviously, since 1986, all three countries have developed baseline national authorities. I'm sure you've talked about the Robert T. Stafford Act here in the United States. Both Mexico and Canada have similar baseline authorities that really establishes a national focus on emergency management. But as well as that, we've had just a whole number of treaties trying to, and all of them bilateral in nature. The two primary ones that are currently in force are the 2008 agreement with Canada, the 2011 agreement with Mexico, which really calls for us to collaborate together. Now, having an agreement like that and having it do something are two different things. And that's where politics gets involved and real world events get involved as well. And we'll talk about some of that. There have been some bi and trilateral platforms, such as the North American Leaders Summit, which was recently held between the three countries to really, unfortunately, focus mostly on security issues and economic issues. We had hoped that they would elevate emergency management and concerns and building hemispheric resilience to a higher level of dialogue at the leadership level. Hopefully that will happen at the next iteration. Shortly after that summit was held, I was in a meeting in the embassy in Mexico City, meeting with the ambassador, and was able to really, I think, explain how intimately tied disaster is to economic and social health. And unfortunately, I think in all three countries, we have a history of just taking for granted that disasters and disaster response and recovery and all that is a separate topic from the integral health of our countries. And I think, as you'll see, the evolution of the nature of disasters in the Northern Hemisphere, as well as around the world, really puts a lie to that really front and center, we need to be thinking about disaster as a major interrupter of a healthy society in all three countries. Both of the primary agreements with Canada and Mexico called for high-level permanent working groups to look at emergency management and disaster issues. The one with Canada started meeting shortly after the agreement was signed in 2008 and continues to this day. It's essentially mostly a platform for conversation. It has very limited resonance downline into practical applications, particularly in Canada, because they have a much more decentralized system than even we do in the United States. The 2011 agreement with Mexico called for the very same forum, and unfortunately, it has never been established. And we currently have no high-level bilateral platform for really working between the two countries on disaster issues. That's not to say we don't have a lot of bilateral conversation. We actually have a compendium of agreements between us and Mexico and Canada online with literally nearly 100 agreements, very specific to topics such as water maintenance in the Guadalupe Valley, or water management up in the Pacific Northwest. But in terms of a high-level platform for leadership to really talk to each other about how do we get ready for the next catastrophic disaster, those really don't exist right now. Some of the challenges, we have a few challenges there, and they really, I really lump them into history, politics, and economics. I think most of us are pretty familiar with some of the historical challenges. With Mexico, we fought a war. We took 50+% of their national territory away from them. And, we've had the challenges ever since with our southwest border. Canada, we've had similar issues in a certain sense. An interesting factoid around Canada is that up until World War II, an invasion by the United States was one key element in all of the Canadian national disaster security planning, because they have been invaded a number of times by the United States over the over the last 2 centuries, including the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, and that was always considered a key concern of theirs, was the possibility that the United States might decide that, in our own national interest, an invasion would be warranted. Politics are obviously always challenging. The challenge with all 3 countries being democratic constitutional governments is that we have ongoing rotation of leadership. We have changes of parties running, focusing national policy, and those can change on a dime with an election. And it always brings just a bit of instability into both bilateral and trilateral conversations. And again, for emergency management to find its way onto that conversational table to get the attention it needs can be very challenging. And then obviously economics is always a challenge, because even as we start to think about how each of the 3 countries can support each other in times of crisis, before, during, and after, it always comes down to what is legally and financially viable and possible in the very short term and long term. Now, as I said, the fact that the 3 countries, we have a long history actually of working together, but it's always been an ad hoc response based on an event. So it's post-event, it's right of the boom, so to speak. Starting as far back as 1826, where the Red River Basin up in the northwest central area, it perennially, annually is flooding both countries back and forth, impacting communities and forcing both countries to support each other depending on how the flooding goes. But you can see the long list there. All of these are events that one or both of all of the countries have gone to the aid of another in providing aid. Obviously, the most recent for us, aside from COVID, where we're all collaborating together to try to get a handle on the pandemic, probably the most, to me, from my work in FEMA, was in the 2017 hurricane season, when we had hurricanes devastate the Gulf Coast as well as Puerto Rico, and both Mexico and Canada came to our aid. For the first time, the United States actually had to go abroad and ask the world community for aid in providing meals ready to eat, that didn't require refrigeration for the people of Puerto Rico as we tried to rebuild the power grid down there. So again, I think the past validates that there is a need here, and it shows that it can be done, but rather than going through the awkward and sometimes very painful process of doing this on an ad hoc basis. And my work with Mexico and Canada was always, frantic phone calls to embassies and are getting that dreaded phone call from the White House saying they had been in touch with their counterparts, and what was FEMA going to be doing to respond to these types of issues. I think it behooves us to be a little more scientific about this and to plan ahead for what could happen. Now, some of the barriers, of course, some are tactical and operational. We do operate under different systems, although there's a program right now where we're moving the three countries together in terms of how not only do we respond utilizing the incident command system, but also how do we structure our disaster response, and how do we work together, especially in these border areas where we have so many millions of people. How do we collaborate in terms of communicating and sharing information to help people be better prepared? So there's still some tactical and operational things that have to happen. Again, when the minute you cross an international border, different rules and regulations go into effect. A very simple one is, where all three of us are working on our urban search and rescue programs in terms of being able to respond to catastrophic earthquakes. And when we had the high-rise collapse in Florida 2 summers ago, and we brought in aid from even from Mexico, it became very challenging and problematic to get that tactical and operational integration that is really key to a successful response. And another barrier is in the political field, that as we talk about how the countries will collaborate together, part of the challenge is that since we're talking about crossing international boundaries, we have to bring in our foreign affairs ministries. For us, of course, it's the Department of State. For Canada, it's Global Affairs Canada. For Mexico, it's the External Relations Ministry or Secretariat. And they're not subject matter experts in emergency management. So when we start trying to set up very high level conversations to really look at problems that we could jointly address and potentially resolve, it gets a little sticky, because our foreign affairs people like to think that all foreign affairs redounds to their authorities. And so we have to sort of work around those. Some of the other barriers are legal in the sense that quite often all three countries have laws and regulations that would come into effect if any kind of foreign responder were to go into that country. I can give you a very good example. At the height of the COVID pandemic, toward the end of 2019, as the United States was really confronted with a scarcity of medical personnel, as our frontline medical workers, the nurses and the doctors, were really getting burned out in the response. We were looking at ways of being able to bring in medical first responders from abroad, and trying to deal with the legal issues around having someone with that kind of credential actually provide service and save lives in the United States. It was very challenging. It was the same for Canada. It was the same for Mexico as well. Now, right now, we have a few projects ongoing that I can share with you. Before I left FEMA at the end of December, we were in year 3 of an 8-year project that was funded by the Army North, the U.S. Northern Command out of Colorado Springs, to really align and integrate the emergency management capacity building in both the United States and Mexico. And what that simply meant is we were translating and transferring the entire work of emergency management training and education that's being conducted up at our Emergency Management Institute in Emmitsburg, Maryland, and sending it down to the National School for Civil Protection in Mexico. Because one of the things that they were very interested in was building a more professional emergency management system and process and of professionalization of emergency managers in Mexico, similar to what we have here. So it's it's an arduous process, and really taking literally hundreds of training courses, converting them into more of an international format so that they're not so US centric, removing things that are really unique to the US, and then translating them into Mexican Spanish, and then actually getting them up there and being able to integrate them into the curriculum at the national school. So a very exciting project. I look forward to seeing how that gets resolved. I mentioned urban search and rescue. We are currently working with both Canada and Mexico on the same thing. You may be aware that FEMA has the national system for urban search and rescue teams here in our country. We have 28 teams. Part of our catastrophic disaster planning is realizing that in a catastrophic event, we may lose quite a few of those teams to the event itself. And that could be the team is in, or the team itself must respond to its own state, because these are all state-based teams. These are not federal teams parked at FEMA headquarters in Washington. They're from Florida all the way to Hawaii. And so we know that in a truly catastrophic event, we will quite likely require bringing in foreign urban search and rescue teams. And there's a lot of issues around that, legal and tactical. But Canada, we're working with them to rebuild their program. They, unfortunately, in a previous government, eliminated their entire USAR program and just left it to the provinces to do it on their own. Prime Minister Trudeau has brought that back and is rebuilding it, reinvesting in a national level program. And so FEMA will be working closely with them to, again, align it with what we do here. Mexico is the same thing, but it's a little unique twist, because rather than working with the government of Mexico, we're actually working with the Mexican Red Cross Society. They have the most advanced urban search and rescue team in Mexico, and they go around the world responding to major crises all over the globe. And so they are working through the United Nations International Search and Rescue Accreditation Group to get certified as a formal team. And FEMA, again, is in collaboration with them to support that. The idea being then that 3 countries each will have this kind of tactical and operational capability that is able to easily integrate into the other, depending on where that next catastrophic event happens. So again, just a few of the current projects that I think, again, will bear fruit as we continue to look at trilateral and bilateral collaboration. I started out by mentioning that I didn't want to overlook our third border. That's what the Department of Homeland Security calls the Caribbean area. It is a very vital area in terms of what occurs there, what comes through there. Homeland Security is very interested in looking at ways of working with all the countries in that area in building their ability to prepare for and respond to disasters. So there is the U.S. Caribbean Resiliency Partnership, which is led by the Department of State, but FEMA is a key part of it, with a whole host of multilateral, private, and governmental organizations throughout the Caribbean basin, looking at how do we support each other in building resilient communities. So again, I think as we move forward, ensuring that we don't overlook this third border as a possibility for hemispheric resilience. So where do we get to? Where do we need to go? And this is really the heart of what this is my conversation's about. And it's that we really need to look at developing a North American alliance that has the imprimatur of our three major governments, is recognized as a critical component not only of national planning but of continental planning, and has the political and the financial support to be able to move forward in the 21st century in looking at those issues that we know are already impinging on us, whether it be the Cascadia subduction zone in the Northwest Territory, whether it be the tsunami threats on the Pacific coast and our Western coast, whether it be whether it even be terrorism and cyber threats to all three countries. We really need to develop an alliance that helps us to develop cross-border mutual aid mechanisms within a framework that honors the sovereignty of the three countries, but really has the flexibility to address both bilateral and trilateral issues as we move forward. So this is a very new idea. I know the Wilson Center in Washington is getting ready to come out with a book that really looks at a call for this in a more formal format. And I'm in conversations with them to just provide my experience over the years with FEMA. So again, I look, hopefully in your lifetime, we will see this kind of alliance come to fruition. So with that, I will stop.